What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you a Genesys profile for Pumpkings. Now, I don't know the official name of this deck, whether it's Pumpkins or it's Bones, but it's probably like Pumpking Zombies. But what I've tried to do with this build is, again, the exact same way as I did with the original Bones build, is I kept it zombie focused. If you want to improve its consistency and just improve its competitive nature, you can involve the Odeons, which I did see at the UK Open, which was actually a really fun surprise to see. Now, this entire deck list totals up to 96 points. There are some cards you can change and adapt out as you wish, but like I've already mentioned, I've tried to keep this zombie focused, and of course the 96 points include the main, the extra, and the side deck as well, which I'll take you through in the profile. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you'll miss out on any more upcoming content. Starting off with the Pumpkin cards themselves, we're going to be playing free Stare of the Snake Hair. You're going to want to max out on your consistency pieces for the Pumpkin strategy, and the best thing about it is all of the Pumpkin cards are 0 points. So your points can then be utilised for non-engine cards, and the majority of our points that I'm going to be utilising are going to be for cards like Forbidden Droplet, Super Polymerization, and Divine Arsenal AA Zeus. So free Stare of the Snake Hair. If you're new to this deck and the way that it works, it all revolves around Call of the Haunted. So you get to discard this card to add one Call of the Haunted or a spell and trap that mentions it from the deck to the hand. If this card is special summons, you get to target and tap position monster your opponent controls. That face-up monster cannot attack, its effects are negated, and it can't be used as Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link material. Now remember, in Genesys you don't need to worry about it being locked from being Link material, but just being able to lock it from Fusion, Xyz, and of course Synchro material can be massively damaging. Then we do have the Mac Daddy boss in the form of the Pumpkin King, the Grave Ghosts. So this one you get to reveal it in the hand to then set a Call of Haunted directly from the deck or graveyard, and if you do, you discard a card. That set card can be activated that turn. If this card is special summoned, you get to special summon a level 6 zombie monster from your deck, except with 1950 attack, but you can't special summon from the hand or the graveyard for the rest of this turn except zombie monsters, which is absolutely fine because that's what we're only going to be doing anyway. Then we're playing free Ectoplasmic Fortification. So if you control no monsters, you get to add a level 6 zombie monster or a Call of the Forgotten from the deck to the hand. Now, more times than not, you could go for your Stare of the Snake Hair, or you can go for your Pumpkin, the King of Grave Ghosts. Its secondary effect is zombie monsters you control gain 400 attack. Then you get to draw cards equal to the number of Call of the Haunted you control. You can only activate one Ectoplasmic Fortification per turn. The other is it's going to be your searcher, but if you've already got the ability to search, you can go for the draw power if you already have your Call of the Haunted, or you just go for an attack stat buff on your entire field and then push him for game. For the other cards that are related to the Pumpkin King cards, we play one Vortex of Time. So when your opponent activates a normal or quick play spell card or effect of a monster effect while you control a zombie monster and Call of the Haunted, except during damage step, your opponent tosses a coin and that effect becomes the following. So if it's heads, your opponent must banish one monster they control. So the opponent in this scenario is us, so we would have to banish one monster we control. However, if it's tails, the player that's just activated that effect must banish all monsters they control. So it's a fair trade-off for a 1 for what could possibly be an entire field, but it also changes the effect. So the effect doesn't get to resolve if they activated something like a Infinite Impermanence. Sorry, not an Infinite Impermanence, because it has to be specifically a spell card, but let's say they activated, or even a monster effect like... I'm just trying to fit the exact... Let's say Mystical Space Typhoon, for example, right? They activate Mystical Space Typhoon, you turn that effect from being target spell trap on the field and destroy it into, you know, banish a monster or banish the entire field. So then we play one Call of the Forgotten. So when this card is activated, you get to set up to 3 Call of the Haunted from the deck and or graveyard, and if you do until the end of your opponent's turn, you cannot special summon except zombies or monsters from the graveyard. Once per turn, if you activate Call of the Haunted, you get to target a monster your opponent controls and you send it to the graveyard. Only activate one Call of the Forgotten per turn, and that is a field spell. I probably should have gone over the other zombie monsters, but I've kind of buried them under the trap for some reason. So we'll do the trap first. You don't have to main deck Deadly Zombie Breath, you can side it if you want to. I quite like it, I think it's a very fun option. So you can try a zombie monster and Call of the Haunted, you target a monster your opponent controls and you send it to the graveyard. If you try a zombie monster, you get to banish this card from the graveyard to then target one face-up card you control and a face-up card your opponent controls. You send them to the graveyard. You can only use one effect per turn, but the other is in the graveyard, you can banish this. You can actually send your own Call of the Haunted, which has already been used and is no longer equipped or like connected to a monster, to the graveyard, and then you get to bring it back with all of your other cards. And then for the 2 monsters that I did overlook is one Army of the Haunted and one Great Mammoth of the Netherworld. Again, you don't have to play these if you want to sub them out, but these are the bonus cards. This is kind of what makes it as fun as it is. You could also consider, another card I've been considering is Ready Fusion, which is 0 points. And you play the Fusion version of this guy, which is just another level 6. It just lets you be a bit more, you can push a little bit more for your rank 6s, which can be quite important. So if you control Call of the Haunted and this card is in the hand or graveyard, you get to special on this card. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you get to target a Call of the Haunted in your graveyard and set it. And then your Mammoth is if this card is special summoned and you control Call of the Haunted or a zombie monster except itself, you get to target a card on the field and destroy it. Only use each effect once per turn. A zombie XYZ that has this card as material gains 1,000 attack. Then your generic zombies, which are also 0 points, is free Uni Zombie. This can become your Foolish Burial from the hand or the deck. The idea is that from the deck you can get your Pumpkin King into the graveyard when you've got stuff like your Call of the Haunted. You can also get Stare of the Snake Hair sometimes. You can also, more commonly than not, you're probably going to be going for stuff like a Mizuki, a Garlic Bloom, or in the odd scenarios you might even want to send an Eldritch the Golden Lord. So all of these have very great graveyard effects. Mizuki, banish it, revive a zombie monster from the graveyard. Bloom, if it's sent from the deck to the graveyard, you get to add a level 5 or higher zombie monster from the deck to the hand. Or if Zombie World is in the field zone, you get to special on it instead, which is where you can utilize cards like Doom King Balderrock. And yes, we are playing Zombie World in this build. Eldritch the Golden Lord, pretty straightforward. It's just an insane boss monster you can send from the hand with a spell card to then target a card on the field and send it to the graveyard. Then you can send one of your spells or traps to the graveyard, bring it back. And the benefit of something like that is you've got dead Call of the Haunted, you just get to recycle back around. Then we've got one Jacko Bolan, one Chenxing, the Spirado. This is the card more times than not you're going to be summoning off of the back of your Pumpkin King, because this lets you send a zombie monster from the hand or deck to the grave, so you get an additional Foolish Burial. And if it does become banished, you get to banish a zombie monster from your grave and special summon it back. You place it on the bottom of the deck when it leaves the field. Jacko Bolan lets you discard a zombie monster to special summon this card. And then during your opponent's main phase, you get a quick effect to target a zombie monster in either graveyard and special summon that monster, but you banish it when it leaves the field. Then banish one face-up monster until the end phase. Face-up card until the end phase. Only use each effect once per turn, but it's just a nice way of either snatching in from your opponent's graveyard or just being able to get access to a card from your graveyard instead. Balderrock is when a zombie monster effect is activated, you get 2 effects. One, negate that effect. The second one is banish a monster on the field or graveyard. So it does become better if you do play Ghost Bell or Ash Blossom, but when you have Zombie World on the field, everything becomes zombie. So as soon as your opponent activates a monster effect, Balderrock goes banish or negate. One Gozuki, so during your main phase, you get to send a zombie monster from the deck to the grave. If this guy is sent to the grave, you get to banish a zombie type monster from the grave, except itself, and special on a zombie from the hand. So again, it's just another way of Foolish Burying. When you remember that Foolish Burial in Genesys is 33 points, being able to play cards like this can be massively invaluable. Then we are on free Shuanui Solitaire, like keeping in mind that Ash Blossom is a premium in Genesys, so being able to resolve this is just going to be a little bit more consistent, and this is going to turn yourself into more copies of getting into your Uni Zombie. We've already mentioned how good Uni Zombie is to send from deck and sometimes send from hand. The final monster we got is one Necro Whale Banshee, and the idea behind this one is the Necro Banshee, if you want to get Zombie World in rotation, you send this, banish it from the graveyard, get you Zombie World, and then straight away that will open up some other doors for you. While we're speaking on the second field spell, the third and final field spell we're playing is 2 Delta of Invitation. So when this card is activated, you get to send a level 5 or higher zombie from the deck to the grave. Yes, of course, you can send your Pumpkin, you can send the Snare, but the idea is you're going to be sending the Eldritch the Golden Lord more times than not. And then on top of that as well, you get to special on a Delta token, which is a zombie dart level 5 with 0 attack and 0 defense. The benefit of something like this is as long as you control a zombie monster, you get to do that. This will open up the door for Chaos Angel plays a lot more consistently. So if you wanted to, you could afford to cut this down to 1. But the idea is still being able to get Eldritch the Golden Lord into rotation could be a massive good play, like power play in Genesys, just because of how strong it can be. The fact it can't be targeted and destroyed makes it really awkward when you bring it back via its own effect. Then we're playing one Curse of the Ancient Turtle. This is just another form of Foolish Burial, but this one does require you to have a graveyard set up. So you banish a zombie monster from the hand or grave to then send a zombie monster from the deck to the grave. And then when your zombie monster is destroyed by battle, you get to banish it from the grave to then special summon a zombie monster with 2,000 or less defense from the deck. So it can all be very, very useful and very, very good. I don't feel that it's worth maxing out on. You could, in place of the second Delta, play a second Curse of the Ancient Turtle, which I think would be absolutely fine. Then we've got 2 Call of the Haunted. Again, all of these are, just going to double check this. Yep. All of these, 0 points, so no points spared or used right now. 2 Call of the Hornage, you can play free if you want to. I felt that free was probably a little bit too much, just because of how easy it is to recycle them. The only benefit of playing free is that you get free draws off of the Call of the Forgotten, but 2 is more than enough. And then the cards that start to take up some points, we've got free Super Polymerization and free Forbidden Droplets. So 13 points apiece there and 10 points apiece there. Honestly, I think they're all absolutely fine. You could change out Droplet for Forbidden Crowns if you wanted to, which would just be a like-for-like trade-off. But the idea with Forbidden Droplet is sometimes you will open up Mizuki, sometimes you'll open up Golden Lord, and you kind of want them to be in the graveyard. There will be times that you'll change certain card effects, and then you can chain the Forbidden Droplet to them. It's other ways of being able to use your Call of the Haunted once they're face up on the field and kind of locked in position to send them to the grave and get them reset. So it can be very, very useful for you. So that's the entire main deck on that one. And the main deck would only be, just doing the maths off the top of my head, I think it's 69 points. Cool, classic. 69 points on that one. And then when we move on to the extra, like the side deck is completely free. Like I said, there are 6 more points to play around with. It's the side deck, the extra deck. Side deck, takes up 3 points because of Dark Hole. But anyway, Super Poly targets. We do have the Draco Necro, the Never Soul Dragon. So the fact of the matter is when you have Zombie World in play, everything becomes a Super Poly target with this guy. Drax Depelio using a fusion and then a dark. And then we've got Garura, the Wings of Resonance Life. The idea is this is going to take up 4 points, but behind this one, your Garura is just going to be your generic Super Poly target alongside the Mud Dragon. Then we do have Starving Venom. Again, could be flexed out if you wanted to. It's mainly in here because you get Darks yourself, so it can help you beat an aggressive push, but in Super Poly can also be a very nice field breaker. Then we do play 1 Eldritch the Mad Golden Lord and 1 Fallen Angel of the Golden Land. So this one, more times than not, you're actually going to be special summoning it via Super Polymerization using Eldritch the Golden Lord and a zombie monster. Because the other way you can get this is you have to tribute off Eldritch the Golden Lord. While you have Eldritch the Golden Lord in the graveyard, you have to tribute off a light zombie monster, which you don't play any other light zombie monsters. And then the idea is that when this leaves, it gets you into this. For our synchros, we only play 1 in the form of the Red Eye Zombie Dragon Lord. You could play, and I'm not too sure if it's still to one side for me, but you could play the Felgrand Dragon, which is a level 8. And the reason that you could consider playing that is it has an on-special summon effect, that if this card is special summoned, you target a card on the field and banish it. So once you synchro summon it, you could successfully, you banish a card on the field, and then you can bring it back with the Call of the Haunted and then banish another card. So it can be very, very effective for you, and that's something you might want to look into. For the rank 6, I've got Dampier the Vampire Sheridan. I actually really quite like this, and I'm considering bumping that up to 2, but I do play 1 Wallow as well. Both of these cards, 0 points, really, really cool. But these are your generic level 6s that don't specifically require zombies, and that's quite important because there'll be times where you might steal some of your opponent's monsters. There's a card we play in our side deck that will steal one of your opponent's monsters, and that's where Vampire comes in, because Vampire lets you use a monster that is owned by your opponent that has a level as a level 6. So it actually lets you get into Vampire even if their monster is like a level 1, 5, 10, whatever, it doesn't matter. Then we've got 2 Pumpking the Great King Ghosts. So this one is while you control Call of the Haunted, your opponent cannot target any zombie monsters that you control with monster effects. Only use each of your opponent effects once per turn. If it's special summoned, you get to add a Call of the Haunted or a card that mentions it from the deck to the hand. And you get to detach material from this card to target 2 cards on the field and return them to the hand. So again, in other ways, activate the Call of the Haunted in the combo, bring back your Pumpkin, go into the Pumpkin the Grave King Ghost, and then when you overlay his Xyz material, Call of the Haunted gets stuck face up on the field. You then use Pumpkin the Great King Ghost to return it to the hand. You get to reset it and go again. Then I'm playing 2 Undying Legions. You don't have to play 2. This could be where that Felgrand card comes into play. But this one can also be Xyz'd on top of a rank 6 zombie Xyz monster you control. And you treat its materials as, it transfers its materials. During your opponent's main phase, you get a quick event to detach 2 materials from this card for all 1 if all materials are Xyz monsters. Target tap position monster your opponent controls or a monster in your opponent's graveyard and attach to this card as material. Then the final card we're playing is the 1 Divine Arsenal AA Zeus Sky Thunder. And the idea behind that one is if you just wanted a fat Zeus, you don't have to, but if you just wanted a fat Zeus, you could go Pumpkin the King of Ghosts with 2 materials, rank it on top into the Undying Legion, attack with the Undying Legion, and then go on top of your Zeus. As long as you don't zombie lock yourself, that's when you're going to cause yourself a little bit of an issue, but you kind of keep that in your mind that you can't do Zeus if you do it that way. But the idea is that once you get that Zeus there, Zeus will then have 2 wipes, which is going to be really, really important. Alternatively as well, you do have that option that you could go through the King of Grave Ghost, detach its materials, then you can go into the Undying Legion, Undying Legion will detach the 1 to then absorb one of your opponent's monsters, and then you get to put the Zeus on top. The Zeus will have the 2 materials, being the 1 from your opponent and then the 1 from itself, or the 1 of the Undying Legion as well. So there's a couple of different options you can utilize, and that's why I thought Zeus was a good option. You can now, considering that Rarity Collection 5, which will be out next week, once that drops, you could technically put in Chaos Angel, and that becomes just as cheap and budget and easy to put together. That's the other thing I really like about this deck, is it doesn't actually cost a huge amount of money and is crazy amounts of fun. Moving on to the side deck. So for the side deck, we've got 3 Genesys. You'll see that my side deck is very built for going second, and I've built this deck to be very, very aggressive rather than controlled. But the idea is you've got your 3 Genesys to break you out your towers. Playing 3 Hekahan Godos. You can very easily play 3 DD Crows. What I like about this in Genesys is it lets you take control of one of your opponent's monsters, which I've already mentioned can be very good for Sheridan, but also being able to kind of control your opponent's graveyard a bit and then banish it when he leaves the field can be very useful. And then I've got a lot of breakers. Now I play 3 Final Bringer of the End Times. The reason for this is, one big issue with a zombie style deck is if you take away their graveyard, especially when you revolve around Call of the Haunted, which needs the graveyard, it can be massively damaging. So you need a card that doesn't send us cost, that can out cards like Dimensional Fissure, because that is a card that is being utilized like crazy right now in the format. And that's where Final Bringer of the End Time comes into it, because this gives you the balance to deal with any card your opponent controls. So you target a monster you control and a card your opponent controls and you destroy them. Yes, you can only activate 1 per turn, but the fact that this gave me the balance of being able to deal with monsters and spells or traps was really, really helpful. Speaking of dealing with just spells and traps, 2 Twin Twisters, I am worried about Dimensional Fissure, I'm not going to lie. You could change this out for Mystical Space Typhoon if you wanted to. The benefit of using this is, as I've already mentioned, there are sometimes you want your cards in the graveyard, but then on the double side of that one is if you are already playing cards like Super Polymerization, Forbidden Droplet, and Twin Twisters, all cards that want you to discard or send cards, it can be very, very resource taxing, which is why the Call of the Forgotten draw power can be quite important for you. And then the final card I've gone with is 3 Dark Hole. So this is the only card in the side deck that has points allocated to it at 1 point apiece. I did want this to be the Utopic Draco Future, the Utopic Draco, the Draco Future, the trap card that is a counter trap card, but it only really dealt with monsters on the field, and I kind of didn't have enough points spare to put in Iron Thunders, which is something else that I might consider, as you kind of want to be able to be a little bit more controlled against breakers. But the idea is that I've built this deck to, it can go first, like its natural go first play, which I'll show you now actually, just to give you a very baseline understanding of what this deck can do with 1 card. Shows you just how good the single card can control the field. So I'm going to zoom this out a little bit. So your single card that you're going to need for this one is going to be your Pumpking, the King of Grey Ghost. Now remember, you've got routes to get to this through the Ectoplasmic Fortification, so you've got consistency there already. You reveal the Pumpking, you'd then add the Call of the Haunted and discard the Pumpking. The Call of the Haunted can then be activated this turn, so you'd activate this, you'd bring back your Pumpking. Your Pumpking would then let you summon 1 monster from the deck that is except with 1950 attack. You can summon out your Sporado. The Sporado will then send 1 from deck to grave. Depending on what you want to try and bring back during your opponent's turn, that will depend on what you send. I'm going to send the Stare of the Snake Hair. Then you'd overlay these 2 level 6s into a rank 6 XZs, being your Pumpking, the King of Grave Ghosts. This then has the ability that gives you to add a Call of the Haunted or a card that mentions it. So you want a second Call of the Haunted, you can grab it. Otherwise, the card you can then open up your options to would be Deadly Zombie Breath. But you can also grab Vortex of Time. And if you really, really wanted to, you can also grab Call of the Forgotten. All of these are going to have different applications depending on how you want to try to use them. So the Call of the Forgotten lets you set an additional Call of the Haunted from the deck. And the benefit of that is that when you activate a Call of the Haunted, you'll be able to target a monster your opponent controls and sends it. So that's your send option. You've got your Vortex of Time that lets you respond to one of your opponent's effects. And then you've got your Deadly Zombie Breath, which lets you target a monster your opponent controls and you send it to the graveyard. This will just be there for the graveyard follow-up, which is why this would be an option as opposed to Call of the Forgotten. And then the Vortex of Time is one of the ones that if you think your opponent is going to respond, you want to protect yourself a little bit more. So in this scenario, I'll probably go for the Vortex of Time just to give you that base example. And then what you're going to do here is you're going to use your Pumpking, the King of Grave Ghost, detaching the material being the Pumpkin King itself, to return the Call of the Haunted to the hand so that you can reset it again. And then before you finish off, you're going to overlay into a Undying Legion, so that during the main phase, you get a quick effect to detach 2 materials from this card, unless it's all XZs, target a tap position monster your opponent controls, and or a monster in their graveyard and attach it to it as material. So now what's going to happen is during our opponent's turn, we've got the ability to activate Call of the Haunted. This can do one or two things. You can bring back Pumpking, the King of Grave Ghosts, or you can just bring back the Snare of the Snake Hair straight away, up to you. The Pumpking, King of Ghosts, will then be able to summon out the Snare itself. So, or you can go for any of your other options here, however it may be. And like I said, if you wanted to set up 2 Call of the Haunted, so you got to action one of these plus this, you'd go for the Call of the Forgotten instead. But we've got that as one option. This can then get you into one of 3 options. And then you've also got the Vortex of Time if your opponent responds to you. And then you also have the Undying Legion as well that can detach too, and then absorb. So you've got a nice little bit of interaction there, all from the one card, which is why it's quite affordable to play a lot of breakers in the forms of droplets and super polys and everything else. Because if you just imagine adding a super poly, a forbidden droplet, and something else to that opening hand, like that hand becomes very, very difficult for your opponent to deal with. And that is pretty much it. That is it for the entire profile. Hopefully this has given you a bit of an idea on what the deck can do. I really, really do enjoy these style of decks. Like, looking back at all of the Maze sets we've received so far, Gate Guardian, I expect it not to be top tier end in meta, but it's still an incredibly fun deck to play. You look at Odeons. Odeons was probably the strongest of those type of decks that we received, being the Gravekeepers, the Odeons, the Tombkeepers, however you want to say it. But the idea is that that was an incredibly strong deck that did ultimately end up winning a YCS as well, which is insane. Then we look at the Bones. Now, I'm not saying that the Bones deck is going to go and win a YCS or anything along those lines, but it is still incredibly fun, very, very powerful, and it doesn't break the bank if you buy them before hype. And what I love about decks like this is it takes such a small adaptation from modern, advanced, however you want to call it, into Genesis and vice versa. So it gives you, as a duelist, a deck that can do 2 jobs, which is very, very effective. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Any questions at all, put them down in the comments below. I will be more than happy to answer them. For now, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.